You are world champion 24.
There's the World Cups of hockey go they used to be every 4 years, now they're every 2 years. And generally we go sort of long distance, or it's Europe, and it sort of alternates between two. But I've played in World Cups in Auckland, in Canberra, in Singapore, Hong Kong, cool, as well as European cities.
But only masters, or?
Yeah, so I played international hockey for junior international under 20.
You have built a company from the ground up to be one of the most successful water consulting companies in the UK. And sticking still with like hockey, what does the number 13 mean to you, and why did you decide 13?
Okay, so it's 13 is it's partly because nobody else wants 13, and I quite like to sort of be a little bit different and to stand out. So really, it was everyone's going for number 10, number 9, number 6. These are very popular numbers. And nobody ever picks 13. And so whenever says, is there a number you want? Because I've been playing in the team for quite a long time. There is you get a little bit of choice.
Yeah.
And so, if you're first up, number 10's not the first number because it's such an obvious choice. So I chose 13. And I've had 13 for a very long time.
Long means?
Well, I think 15 years or so. I've had to change once or twice because somebody else had 13, and I felt that they really wanted it, and okay, fine. So I'm not too bothered. But sometimes we swap shirts at the end of games. At the end of the tournament, the final game is usually you swap gear. So I've got lots of German, Dutch, Australian shirts that we swapped over the years. I'm currently playing with number 17, so I shall give away my number 17 shirt, but I shall keep my number 13. And next season I shall be back in my number 13 shirt, which I like to be. It's a little bit just to be different and not to be obvious, and I quite like that. And that sort of matches some of the things I like to do in business. Trying to find things that are a little bit different and a different perspective, a different approach. And I guess one might call that innovation, but I think it's just more to try to sort of stand out a little bit. And we've been pretty successful at doing that over a long number of years.
How did you combine the hockey with running a business and growing a business from 0 to a couple of hundred people?
Well, I personally think you need a break, and so it's a great. I'm quite a big fan of yoga, so and I've only come to this in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's extended my hockey career, so I can still play because I can still move. And it's great. You can't stand on one leg and think about a sales target or a proposal.
Yeah.
Well, I can't. So there's really a matter of just sort of taking out, I find it very easy to fall into the trap of always thinking about work. And holidays are sometimes a little bit challenging, particularly for myself, but also for the family. And so that's a great way of actually making something that you can't do two things. You really need to focus on one, and it's great to have it. And hockey's not a hobby for me. It's something I'm deeply committed to, coaching, managing, playing, and being involved in just the sport as a whole. So it's really a way of breaking from and separating it from my business work.
So you played your whole life?
Yeah, I think I started at 10 or something like that. So I played it. Through my sort of junior years up to sort of 21, I was playing at a pretty high standard, and then just going into club, and the clubs are fantastic because it's such a community. I'd say it's all age groups from juniors. We've got an under 6s, and that is great fun. You hold the stick the other way round, and it takes a little while, but they all get it, and you feel at the end of the year that they're much better players and they have fun, and there's nothing like a 5-year-old sort of scoring a goal and spinning away. You don't get that joy.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And then, of course, coaching the men and the ladies, it's a little bit different. That's a bit more.
You have been even like assistant coach in the World Cup while playing yourself.
Yeah, so it's much more professional now. So we've got physio, coach, manager, and a team lead for all the England teams over here. So when I was in Singapore, I was the captain, but I also had to do the coaching And so that was really hard to do. But you put a great team of people together and everyone knows their role, and it kind of, you don't have to sort of repeat messages you've been repeating for a long time.
Yeah.
They kind of get it, and it just becomes automatic. And then we're just problem solving as a collective. And it's not so much, and certainly my style of leadership in business is not so much, we will do this.
Yeah.
It's really about a collective knowledge and responsibility, but also about sort of sharing the burden of leadership and innovation, but also really finding and encouraging a way of thinking, which I think is very profitable.
How similar is, like, if we take your leadership style as a captain or even coach to being the CEO or former CEO of your own business?
So I'm much harder in my hockey life. I'm a little bit. I'm really quite strong about fitness, about ethics and behaviour, and about playing styles. Because I think you do need a framework when you're in a team and a sporting environment. With work, I'm much less of that person, and so it's not so much softer, but actually really reconsidering options, listening to different people's perspectives, and really not minding whose perspective it is. It doesn't have to be an executive or a manager or somebody who's leading that team, or somebody who's an expert even. And often they don't have the best ideas. Actually, an expert is really good for sort of framing those the problem you're trying to solve, but is not so good sometimes, a bit too close to it to see what the solution might be or how you can do it differently. And thinking differently is kind of how we've operated for a very long time, and it's been very good.
And if you look back in the career of building your business, and we will go deeper into the business, obviously, over the conversation as well. So you started most probably alone and then built it up to a couple of hundred. How is the leadership or your personal leadership has changed over the last 30 years?
Crikey, that's a good question. I think as you grow teams, it's really, I found the most important thing is to empower them. And, people, I'm an entrepreneur. My family also had their own businesses. My father, my grandfather, we kind of grew up in the environment. Most people don't.
Yeah.
And actually, if you give somebody, particularly if they're quite young, the power to say, it's your decision and what do you think we should do, and then support and back them, I think that's the most important thing. And I'm never worried about age. Often the sort of younger people coming into this, they're absolutely so enthusiastic. They sort of learn so quickly. It frightens me sometimes how good somebody is coming into a business and perhaps after a year is really finding some really great ideas and innovating. They might not spot that that's an innovation. And what you need to do is say, that's really good. We should do that, and then see if we can scale it. And if we can scale it, how can we refine it? And those sorts of thinking, that methodology really works very, very well.
So when you have hired people in the past and even today, what are specific things you look at? Do you look if they play a team sport as an example?
No, I kind of, there's two main principles. I mean, hire on attitude. So if they don't have a good work ethic and are enthusiastic and really kind of want to do it, and they need to communicate that when we're interviewing. But I think just talent, and it doesn't really matter. I've never worried about what's their education was or indeed what industry they've been working in. That's absolutely immaterial to me. What I need is a great attitude and really somebody who's bright and really somebody who's, I think they could do anything. And I'd love them to come and join our team and do something for us. Yeah. And that really is the two principles I've taken in. And sometimes it means taking risks. I mean, our new CEO, Barry, is, he was in his early 30s and hired him as a technical director. And, he hadn't done anything like this before, hadn't worked in water efficiency. He was in the water industry, sort of, but adjacent, I guess. Yeah. And he just came across to me as a guy who really knew his stuff, very confident young man, but also he was quite ambitious and he sort of wanted to make a difference. And I just thought he was fantastic, and I hired him on the spot.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So a couple of months ago, you decided to step down as the CEO and hand it over to Barry.
Sure.
How was that for you? What was what was the way to get to that decision? Because you have been leading and building the business for over 30 years.
I think there's a few things here. Firstly, I think that just the time felt right. I think when you're building a business, you're always thinking about talent coming through. And I think it's the senior leadership team at WaterScan are in a great position. They're a very talented group. They know what they want to achieve together. There's a great community and spirit about the team. I think they're ready to go. I don't think there's anything that they've got all the tools they need. So kind of my job is transitioning from sort of leadership, strategy, and kind of a focal point into a different role, one of support and advice, because I think they're absolutely ready to do that. And so it felt like the right time to do that change. I think the second thing is that there's a lot happening in water at the moment, and I've been in a world where it's actually quite narrow. I'm talking about corporate businesses, large water users, a highly commercial world, and there's a lot more to water than that world, and those all the risks overlap, and we're dealing with an issue in water where we're using too much, and it's becoming more unpredictable, and so that's quite a challenge, and I'd like to sort of talk to people about that challenge and how we meet that challenge across not just in a corporate world, but across more sectors and to more people.
Let's talk about that. So one of the things when we talked last time was a statement where you say no water, no business. Explain that.
Okay, I think for 30 years we've spoken about resilience as a matter of using water more efficiently, controlling costs, applying new technology and trying to control it a little better, and that way build resilience. And over the last few years, that's just not enough. And I think certainly, we're in a drought in the UK, certainly in the southern England. It's just the National Drought Group met yesterday. They've expanded the drought and it's more serious now. It hasn't rained where I live for 50 days. And in England, it rains a lot. And so it's quite an extraordinary change. So looking at that and saying, well, we're talking about efficiency and costs. And now we're talking about resilience in terms of infrastructure and supply. And it manifests itself in recent years. And this summer, we've had a major customer who had a phone call from the water company, says we will be shutting the water off in an hour. And if water's part of your product, it's just, what do you do about that? And it was kind of panic stations. I mean, the second phone call they made was to me. So we dealt with it and dealt with the water company. But that's never happened before. And it's quite unprecedented.
What was the reason they decided to say that we are shutting it off in an hour?
One of the issues that we've got, this is why I want to have a conversation with more people, is that it's not about, and there is water in the system. The reservoirs aren't at zero. The demand is so high, the system can't supply the water at the rate that people are using it. And so, you get the situation where that's never happened before, not at this scale. And so you got a major brewer who's, there's a lot of water in beer and into making beer, and it's deeply important. I love beer. And, if they're saying, actually, you can't use water, your production stops. It's very, very hard.
Your product is done.
Your product's done. So it literally was, we actually can't supply customers, and you're a major user. Therefore, one of the ways we solve that problem is to say, we're not going to supply you water so we can supply everyone else. Now, if you're a big brewer, or while you might be sympathetic, commercially, well, there's nothing you can do. That's the reality. But you really need to think about, okay, if that happens, what do I do? And the answer was, we don't know. That really isn't sufficient now. And this is something that's quite new. And I've been talking about it for a long time, maybe 10 years. But I'm surprised at the pace of change. And it's this situation, it's demand-led, not resources-led. It's network resilience. But it's also getting into the situation we're getting in the south of England where actually there isn't enough water. And if there isn't enough water, they take it from the rivers, and our rivers die. And personally, that means a lot to me. I mean, water's really valuable, but it's more valuable in a river than it is, somebody wasting water. And I kind of think of it, every litre of water is precious.
Yeah, and I mean, what we see right now, what you are explaining is the UK perspective. I was just in Portugal. I mean, we have seen the fires in south of Europe this summer in 2026. Even in the Netherlands, where fires, because I'm living in the Netherlands, and we got an information from the city hall that we should not use water for our grass in the garden. Which, I mean, the Netherlands is one of the water countries, but even the Netherlands is now really pushing not to use it. Going back to your example, it's at least when I was working with water topics in one of the largest retailers in the world, we looked at that from more sustainability perspective. But it sounds like organizations need to go from, hey, this is sustainability nice to have, to something that's business critical, understanding how they build redundancy, but also how they make sure, if we take the brewery example, to not have a minus business, not have a shutdown of anything, because that means you shut down the business long term.
Yeah, so I think the environmental aspect is really important, and it's good to frame it in those terms. But it's about business risk, it's about continuity, and it's about security, and that builds resilience. And that's the definition of resilience. Yeah. And you can break that down, quite a lot. But it's also quite simple. Actually, what do you do if? And having those management plans, and actually thinking about those scenarios and seeing what you can do to solve it. But you can't do it if the phone calls come in and you've got an hour to do it. Yeah. You need to plan for it. And in order to do that, if it's in an ESG program, it's kind of in this is a good thing to do. These are the right messages. This is an environmental program, and it becomes a little bit more of a public relations exercise, and it needs to be a business operations exercise, and that is so important. And that's about ownership. It's about understanding the risk, and it's about implementing a program that's going to help you become more resilient.
If we take the brewery, what are things they could do with water? Obviously, they have one supplier of water, I guess, at least, I don't know. What could a brewery like this do?
Well, they have one supplier. Actually, there are alternative supplies. I mean, they do have a borehole on site. I mean, are they operating that borehole as effectively as they can? I mean, actually, if you're using water, quite a lot of water is used in industrial plants, food and drink manufacturing, in cleaning process. Why using clean fresh water for that cleaning process? What opportunities there are to reuse and recycle? What alternative supplies for non-potable are there in your local area? How can we collaborate with local businesses, other partners, and the water supplier, the water company, to ensure we've got a more balanced view? We're not just taking water off the network. Actually, we're reusing it. And actually, when you get into that, you think there's probably a list of 20 things and projects that require investment, that require thinking about how we could do things differently. And sometimes that's a regulatory change. And so I'm deeply interested in getting into regulation changes, not only in Europe. There's a lot of leadership from the EU on this, but there's a whole change of program in the UK as well that's sort of mirroring the same themes that are coming through. It's just a consistent message. We need to use less water. Not less water in the way we produce our beer, less water in how we shower, how we use it at home. And we have a different attitude to water. I don't know about you, but I mean, in the UK, there's a drought. There's a lot of people who think, well, I have a right to use water however I want to.
Yeah.
Well, no, you don't. And it's not the water company's water, it's the environment's water. That water comes from a river. Okay. And I think we need to change that and change people's mindset around that. But in a corporate environment, they need to think about this in terms of, what do I need it for? How important is it to me? How can I make it more resilient? And how can I think of new technologies and new innovations to do things a little bit differently? And then you can build resilience through that method.
Yeah.
And I think there's the fact is the technology's there. We're not having to reinvent or build something brand new. It's all there and available to it. It really is about leadership. It's about understanding the risk, and it's about applying that over a long-term plan.
If we use another example, so it's obviously, if you have a brewery which uses water for the product that they are selling. There was an incident with the Gatwick airport. I think it was last month.
It was.
explain that for people that think an airport, why does an airport need water? They have like airplanes flying.
Yeah, so I mean, water being critical is really important to understand why it's critical. So if you're a Gatwick airport, what do you need water for? Well, it's not really about, I mean, there's a little bit of restaurant use. It's hygiene. You're using it for toilets and hand washing. And there are a lot of toilets and a lot of points of use in a building of that size. And it's very complicated. And if you interrupt it just for a little while, the system doesn't have resilience. It kind of falls down quite quickly.
Yeah.
And so, things like pump sets go down, there's not enough water in tanks, you get all sorts of issues. Actually, starting back up again is really quite hard to do. And so there is the built assumption that water will always be on. And we kind of got to change that. But Gatwick Airport was simply a security supply issue. They lost a supply in that particular area, and it was catastrophic for Gatwick Airport. But there are so many examples like that where we're thinking about water in terms of, well, I just expect it to be on.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more difficult to have that resilience from an infrastructure perspective. So a pub can't do without water. If you're a cafe, you can't do without water. You shut.
Yeah.
There's no sort of, you don't start a generator. you don't get and getting a Bowser in or something like that, or getting an alternative water source like that, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
And so what do you do? It's actually much more difficult for a supermarket, or perhaps not a supermarket, perhaps a pub or a Gatwick airport, than a manufacturing business, which might have tanking. Facilities, storage facilities, treatment facilities, and things like that. So it's surprising where it hurts first, and I think people kind of don't realise that because they haven't really thought about it.
But even in an office business, like we're sitting right now in an office tower. I mean, if we would not have water here for a certain amount of time, we would, you can close the building.
It'll close immediately.
Yeah.
You just can't do it, and why would you want to? You don't want. You can't use the bathrooms. That's kind of quite important. And it doesn't just happen. It'd be okay if it was a small office and you could go to the cafe around the corner.
Yeah.
But an office like this. But even that, people don't. They would close and just say we can work from home. And of course, the reality is, in a post-COVID world, working from home and that type of thing is really easy to do. So actually, there is a bit of resilience there for an office building. Yeah. But if you're a cafe, you have no revenue. If you're a pub, you don't. It's gone. There's zero. Whereas if you're an office, actually, you can work it out because you've been through it because you went through COVID.
Yeah.
And kind of the businesses, I think, commercial businesses at the moment, particularly large users, are going through that now, where they've actually seen the reality of a world where we aren't very resilient about water, and it's happening quickly. And it's probably been underlying for a long time, but it's now becoming apparent. And that's quite a big change. And it's remarkable how quickly that has happened.
Yeah. There's
been droughts for 5 years. Yeah, over the last 6 years, there have been 4 droughts in the UK. I mean, I remember where it rains all the time because I'm old. But it's just, these weather patterns are extraordinary. But it's even if you took the drought out, even if we have normal rainfall, we're going to have a massive shortfall in the amount of demand for water and the amount of supply. It's 5 billion litres a day in the UK. And you don't make that up by finding a new river and harvesting rain. You do that, you've got to hit everything. All opportunities to save water have got to be taken up.
If we look at different levels, so we have the personal level, like you and I at home with our families. Then we have companies that work with or without water. And then we have countries and government and so on. How do we innovate if we look at the whole systematic way on all the different levels? Because I think, at least in my perspective, in the end, we need to work on all the different levels to figure out how we solve this.
Well, I think I'd divide it into 2 things. I mean, firstly, there is a governmental level and a water strategy is important. And I think the EU, the UK government, they are thinking about these issues because, we have a growth agenda in the UK, and it's silly. There's lots of parts of Europe where where, growing the economy is really, really important. If you don't have water, it's very difficult to grow, regardless of what you do.
Yeah.
And so, whether that be for agriculture, for industry, or small businesses, you need that. That piece of work needs to be done, and there people are doing it, but it's slow. And so, people like me influence government, influence water companies to try to change. And I feel that's much more of my role now, and I'm freer to do that piece. But it boils down to consumers. And whether you're a commercial, an industrial, or a domestic consumer, you need to change your attitude to water, and you need to think about it differently. And it needs to result in us using less water and treating it differently.
That means, in the end, it's behavior change, which is the most difficult.
And we're just getting into a behavioral change world. Water, you've seen, energy and carbon, they've been, turn the lights off, and even sort of public safety and highways and all sorts of behavioral change projects. And now it's just ingrained into habit. It's not behavioral change. It's just the way we do things. Yeah. And we need the same thing with water. And it's quite a difficult thing to because people have had an attitude for a very long time about it's always going to be there and I can use it to do whatever I like with it. The answer is it isn't, and you can't. Yeah. And that's quite a big change. But to be honest with you, when you talk to people about water, there's a lot of blame. If you're waiting for government to make the difference, well, you're going to be waiting a long time. Consumers is the way that things are going to change. And I think that they have all the tools they need. And it's also a commercially very good investment. It not only protects your business, but you can save money, you can be more efficient, and there's all sorts of co-benefits of running a water efficiency program. We've seen that over many years. I've been doing that for a very long time. But it also is a critical pillar in building resilience.
Yeah. If we look at business and the commercial version of that, if we say I'm running a company, one of the things when I was working in big retail and we looked into investing into, let's say, rainwater usage and so on, this is more than 15 years ago already. The tricky thing was always water was too cheap compared to electricity. The electricity, as higher the prices got, as higher the return of invest was for PV panels, whatever you do. Water seems still too cheap today for everyone to do something. If we take me at home, I'm not looking at water cost, I'm looking at energy cost, electrical cost.
So I think this is, if I said to my customers, water's too cheap, I might have rotten tomatoes thrown at me. Because it just isn't anymore. Yeah. And broadly speaking, the price in the UK matched the prices across Europe. There's some areas which it's a bit cheaper, but they're beginning to price in security of supply. They're beginning to price these things in. The thing about water is that it's a long-term price change, and you're not going to have the bill shocks you do from a Ukraine war, from what's happening in Iran and all that sort of thing. So you don't get these energy crisis moments. It builds slowly, but you can't stop it. And so we've seen price increases, and you've seen price increases across Europe, which are steadily ratcheting up. And that is something you can't stop and you can't control. So you can't negotiate a new contract your way out of this. Yeah. And there's no commercial procurement route to solving this problem. It is much, much deeper than that. And so, while I would say it is more important, you will spend more on energy. Water's catching up, and it's going to continue to catch up. And the solution is much more difficult. You can't do a solar panel to create energy and to be off grid in water. And it's also it's quite expensive to do retrofit. It's really easy to do when we're building houses. Yeah. And so that's the role of government. That's the role of regulators, to try to sort of build a future which builds in that resilience, and then we can start to make a difference and move the dial. But eventually, it boils down to people using less water, and you're going to use less, and it's still going to cost you more. And if you don't think that's happening, that's a problem. Yeah. And we really need to get on hold of that. You can't negotiate your way out of that. You can't build in anything, you need to do it now.
If we look at the young talent right now, I was 2 weeks ago in Portugal as a student program and was participating as a mentor and working with young students that are in their early 20s, and they all worked around environmental topics, and water was not the highest topic, but it was part of their way of thinking. So how do you see the talent moving right now? Like, is it easy for you right now getting the top talent in the organization?
Well, we're quite lucky because we're part of the solution,
Yeah.
and we're not a water company, and we're not a government agency.
Yeah.
We're innovative. It's an easy place to work, and you can make a difference really quite quickly. And we have a purpose. I think those things make people want to join and want to be part of that movement. And actually, I think water is the most interesting thing and the most interesting industry that there is at the moment. The challenges, of climate change, of the environment, of business growth. Water is intrinsic into all of those things. And there's so much going on. It's such an interesting thing to get involved in at whatever level you do, that I think it's a great career for a young person to do. But it's got a terrible reputation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably a little bit better in Europe than it is in the UK. But the UK water industry is in a terrible state. And it's because of poor leadership, historic poor leadership.
Yeah.
And I think things are changing. But God, I wish it would change quicker, and they would just grasp the nettle. They really haven't sort of got hold of the fact that this is a big problem, and engaging with customers to get them to use more water is not about telling them use less water, because that never goes down well. Behavioural changes is as you've already said, it's so important to do, and you've got people who are used to doing that. They're people who run the water industry. They're engineers. They look at networks. They're not consumer-facing people. Yeah. And you need that part of it to bring people with you. And that's where there's so many opportunities. But the water industry is a great place to be. It's a great career, and it's deeply interesting, and it'll be very rewarding. But it's got a reputation issue, and they need to solve that quick.
If we look at your business, so if I'm a young student right now, what would be different career opportunities to work in your business? What are the different things that you do where I, as a student, even don't know that you do this kind of things, and the different clients and the different environments that I can learn from while working in your organization?
Well, I think we've always done water efficiency, and it's a really interesting space. But some of the new stuff we're doing is just it kind of blows my mind. And another reason why, to have new talent who perhaps think differently is a really good opportunity for the business. So all sorts of things around data. I mean, we're getting smart data, meter data, consumption data. That is fantastically powerful. But there's a lot of it, and unless you build tools to be able to interpret that data and communicate those messaging and the conclusions to that, what's actually happening to customers so that they can take actionable insights, that's really hard to do. So all those sort of data side of things, we're investing very heavily in that. And there's a lot of people who come from different sectors coming into water and thinking, gosh, this is amazing. You've got so much information. Why aren't you doing more with it? And there's so much innovation in that space. And I think it's also, we mentioned behavioural change. We're doing a major project called Workplace Water Wins. And it's an innovation project that we've been tasked to do. It's involving 15 partners about changing people's attitudes to water at the business level. And that project is really interesting. So it's sort of behavioural science. I'm just getting into that. I didn't realise I didn't know. I thought I was quite good about sort of changing people's. I know nothing about behavioural change, and I'm learning about it, and it's so much fun to do. And you really, really understand the issue. I think probably the other thing is the innovation side of it, which is perhaps it's not easy to understand. Is that a lot of this boils down to what is the return? How can we understand the cost of water to a business and the cost of no water, and really those sorts of financial and commercial aspect of that. I think that's really an interesting space, and we've got some very talented people who can communicate that effectively to customers.
So What is one of your strategies to get this young talents understanding that?
I mean, as I said earlier, we hire talent. It doesn't really, and we give them a problem to solve. Most of all, it comes from customers saying, we think there's a problem here,
Yeah.
and actually we'd like to do something about it. Quite often, it comes from a commercial perspective. We're spending a lot of money here.
Yeah.
What can we do about it? How can we mitigate that over a number of years? And then that's a kind of problem statement. Actually, the young talent's coming in and going, okay, well, let's have a different view of this. Let's have a different approach. And we build different commercial models. And if it works, it's test and expand. That's the key. If something works, why don't we expand it to other customers? And peer review, the WaterScan customer base, when we get a customer, we don't lose them. So we have the customers, I think our average is about 12 and a half years. I've been working with British Telecom for 27 years.
Nice.
So it's a long-term partnership. And there are a number of companies who are quite happy to share, even the ones that might compete. They're happy to share this knowledge. And so those are the sorts of things that we like our talent to get involved in.
Yeah.
And they're because they don't sort of come with baggage of years and years of working in the sector or working in industry, they're quite happy to share, and businesses are too. And the net result is everyone gets a better deal.
Yeah. If we go back 30 years, or a bit more than 30 years, when you started the business, what was your initial thought and the reason you started the business? You started as a chemist, if I have seen it right.
Yeah.
How did you get from there to say, I'm starting WaterScan as a company?
It's a great story. So I was a chemist, industrial chemist, and there was a company in Southampton who was making spark plugs and catalytic converters. You probably don't know what that is. But they were making car parts for the automotive industry. And he was being overcharged. And I was indignant. And I was quite a young man, and I was saying that's just wrong. And so me and the manager, we tried to get it solved. We wrote to Ofwat, and we wrote to the water company, and we did all this stuff, and we got nothing. We got absolutely nowhere. It's just a brick wall of administration was against us, and eventually said, we're not bothered about it, and we're just going to sort of carry on. What can we do? And I said, that's not acceptable. So I said, I'll do it, and I'll invest the time, and because I think it's wrong, and I think we should do something about this, and I'll do it all for you. I said, if you do that, I'll sign a contract with you. And the next day, WaterScan was formed. It was as simple as that. It took us 18 months, and we got them back all the money that they were owed.
That's cool.
And we won, but it took 18 months of quite a lot of stress as a young man. And then kind of it sort of spiraled from there with sort of reputational. It grows, doesn't it? Somebody says, actually, they did a really good job for us. And then we sort of get into that space, and it grows quite naturally.
How was it going from alone to 3 to 5 people to 10 to then over time 50, 100?
It was good. It's a shared burden, but also you could do more of the things you needed to do for the business. So actually, I've never had a problem delegating and giving people the job that I was doing. I've always found that whenever somebody else has done it and they've learnt about it, it comes back better than I did it. And so my job is to find that innovation and find that new way of doing things. It's not really to expand it and really refine it. I find that other people are really, really good at that, and I'm good at sort of pushing the boundaries.
Was it always the mission to get it as big as it is today?
No. We were supposed to be a small consulting business, and that was what I wanted to do. And it was partly about independence, partly about size. I don't think I'm well suited to a large corporate working environment. And so I like to react very quickly. I like to react very quickly to customers' requirements, so very customer focused, like to solve problems. And so I found that in a smaller business rewarding. But then Whitbread and Tesco's came in the sort of early 2000s, and they said, we've got a problem. BT, 1996, they said, we've got a problem. And okay, I think I can solve this problem. And when you find you think you can solve this problem, then it's a deeply motivation, because you go, okay, and they say, well, we're not sure. No, I promise you this is going to work. And you just don't give up, because you know it's going to work, and it did work. And then we sort of scaled that commercial model. And that was sort of the moment that it happened. It wasn't really a plan. It was listening to customers, them giving us problems, us solving it. And broadly speaking, we work in the same environment. You've got to challenge business. If you work for somebody for 12 years, then it's no good selling them the same product. You constantly need to be cutting your cost to make it more efficient for that company. You need to be constantly thinking about efficiencies and doing things better. And also you need to be constantly thinking about the next challenge to solve. And if you have that sort of ethos and working methodology, then customers trust you. And over a long period of time, then it's a very good commercial model.
Looking at 30 years history, I can only imagine, at least for myself, only doing this now a couple of years, they're like always up and downs. What was the way you survived the downsides, like the difficult moments? And that can be sometimes a personal thing with family members, something is happening, but it can be also externally driven downsides that are happening. What gets you going? What got you going and keeps you?
I was quite fortunate, because when it was small, it wasn't so much of a problem. You know, everything was, I could solve it, and so it's quite an easy environment, I think. Well, you know, the problems were big, but you know, you were empowered to sort of think about it, and you know, I'm very driven to succeed, and all those things you'd expect an entrepreneur to say. But I think when you grow a little bit more, it was the team who we got together and we solved the problem together. That sort of collective knowledge, I think, in any organisation is really important. And it's and people underestimate that. A problem, okay, we need to get Neil in to solve that problem. Yeah. And actually, I think about it a totally different way. I need to understand the problem, and I think I'm quite good at doing that. But actually, the solution is a collective thing. And most often, it's most successful when you involve the customer in that solution. So you're thinking about the problem, actually what the challenge is you're dealing with, Mr. Customer, and actually, I think I've got a way of solving that for you and dealing with this issue. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you don't get it right. But we're not sort of a company, and I'm not a person to stand still. You've got to be pushing boundaries. If you're constantly pushing boundaries, then more often than not, it will come good.
Yeah. If we look into the future, like we discussed already, like you stepped out of the CEO role, where do you see your company, but also the industry moving in the next couple of years?
Well, behavioural change, I think, is big. I think the opportunities around data, particularly smart data, and how we can utilise that. And I don't want to sort of say the cliche of utilising AI, but what we're trying to find is issues of overconsumption or waste. And the opportunity to do that more effectively than an individual actually going in and looking at a profile and looking at history and looking at the price and the tariff, actually automating some of those things. So we can do it at scale. And so, and also, whenever we've done these projects, it's also revealed something we didn't know. I mean, COVID is a classic example. So we operate quite a lot of brewery companies, hospitality companies. And we thought we were efficient. We've been doing water efficiency for like 10 years for these businesses. We were on everything. Every litre of water we thought we'd nailed down. Yeah. Then COVID hit and they shut down. But the consumption didn't stop. Yeah. Okay, well, but there's no leak. We've been to these sites. There's no leak. Yes, there was. It was small leakage. It was in areas you weren't expecting it to be. And that completely changed my perspective of what water efficiency is and how you might deploy it. And so it's much more frequent, much more rigorous, and much more on the front foot of programs to repair, to maintain and install good water efficiency saving equipment. And so that's been, I mean, talking about 10% increase in water efficiency measures. And so I didn't even know that was happening. Yeah. And so those sorts of opportunities, that's why smart data and AI can come in. It gives you things you didn't know. And that's very powerful.
If you look at Europe and the broader landscape, where do you think all of that goes? if we look at climate change, I mean, we started with that. It's going to be like more difficult in the future. So we will have more droughts, I guess, at least. Water scarcity will go up. What do we do as industry, as individuals, to really tackle that together?
First, there's a realization you can't control that, and you know, one of the big business rules that we've used is control the controllables. It's kind of the things you can influence, do, and it might be influence and it might be action, but be very clear about what you can do and do it and commit to it, because you always know there's something happening down the road which is unexpected. If we think that the pathway of climate change is going to be smooth and where it's going to manifest itself most critically, then we're wrong, because we don't know what's around the corner. And that really is, in essence, a business continuity and resilience issue. And I think that people don't price in, and businesses don't price in risk in this way. And so I'd say that what we need to do as a domestic consumer, but most importantly as commercial consumer, is actually think about how they're using water, think about risk, think about leadership and innovation, not in terms of I need to do a thing new. There's no silver bullet to this. It's organizational, it's ownership, and it's about understanding the risk. And then actually applying solutions becomes really easy. It's kind of, you can do it on a commercial return basis. It's really that simple. So I think I wouldn't look at this in terms of, you know, I can predict there will be more droughts. I think the indicator is the systems are going to be less resilient. We're using more water as a society across the board, and we're dealing with it in a challenging environment. That is not going to change. The price is not going to change. It's going to increase. If you do nothing now, it will hurt you very much more in the future. The solutions are there. All it requires is a real understanding and a drive in much the same way as we've done with cyber, we've done with AI, we've done with energy and carbon. The pathway has been done for us. This is the advantage with water. We might be late to the party, but businesses have been through this before and done it very successfully. Just apply those things to water. Make it more of a priority. Understand that you've got a risk here you probably don't understand. And that's the conversation with the brewer says you've got an hour, we're shutting the water off. Who's the owner? And people have flown in. There was a little bit of panic. Okay, that's probably, if you don't know the answer to who's dealing with that and what do we do in these scenarios, you're probably saying, okay, I need to think about this.
Yeah. Neil, thank you very much for your enthusiasm and what you do with your company. I think it's a huge opportunity getting us more into thinking about water, and you do a great job in communicating that. Thank you very much for being together with me here in Belgium today.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.